sweep them out of Atlanta.
Put that in your studio right there, handy.
Florida State and Clemson are joining the Big 12. Is that a true statement, a false statement, or why are we even making that statement?
The Tennessee Titans make a huge move, signing former All-Pro safety Jamal Adams.
Buyers and sellers, what they could be selling, what teams are wanting to buy at the trade deadline.
The big Summer League now in Vegas is coming up. What do you need to know? What do you need to watch?
Behind the scenes of the New York Giants Hard Knocks series.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
You guys drilled us.
Oh, this is
MLB crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
I know, Pete, that I can look at this team, this Phillies team, and be really excited, and I am, about the power and Trey Turner's July that he's having. Kyle Schwarber comes back and hits some Schwab bombs for this Philadelphia Phillies team. Brandon Marsh heats up with his bat as well. You have some great vibes down there at Citizens Bank Park, but I have certainly been on the other side of this before, and I know the Dodgers fans are none too happy with how this one turned out, especially looking at guys that went 0 for 11 that are not supposed to go 0 for 11 in a game.
Yeah, Ohtani, Smith, Freeman, just awful. And Freeman didn't get a hit in this whole series, which is also just unbelievable. And, Dave Roberts, of course, people want to fire Dave Roberts every day, especially our guy, Nando. Fire Dave Roberts. It's always Dave Roberts' fault. But today it was not just Dave Roberts' fault. I think another coach had a big problem with today's game, and that would be Dino Ebel, the third base coach. So for me, this is where the game went south for the Dodgers, right? We usually try to find the breaking point or the pivotal moment of the game. This is where it went south for the Dodgers. Shohei Ohtani comes up with the bases loaded and just looks awful. Swinging at curveballs in the dirt, head so far down the first base line. It was like his wife or girlfriend was sitting in the, over top of the dugout. Yeah. But we've talked about that a lot here on the podcast. Shohei Ohtani, when he looks bad, it's awful. But just a tick away from that is Shohei Ohtani looking great. Yeah. So I'm okay with the fact that he doesn't watch the ball most of the time and he's flying open because it can turn into 420-foot home runs, right? But yesterday, he's looked awful. Swinging at bad pitches, just not even watching them, not committing to, hey, I'm going to shorten up when I'm down in the count. No, I'm going to flail at whatever is even close to the zone. It was just awful. But Dino Ebel screwed this game up. You got to send Miggy Rojas on that Gavin Lux single when you are a team that is struggling to score runs. You do not play conservatively. Let your skirt get in the way of scoring runs. What was that all about? I was like, that is going to come back to haunt them because at that point, it was only 1-0. They would have tied the game. It would have been a completely different mindset. Very shortly after, 2-0. Then the Dodgers are playing from behind, struggling to get back into the game. You got to score that guy or at least make them beat you. That's just old school baseball. Make the Phillies beat you there. And if they do, you tip your cap and you say good play. But you can't hold up because Ohtani's up next. No, awful. Terrible.
All right. Here's what I'll say. As from the Phillies' perspective, I totally thought that run was going to score because Nick Castellanos, although he's leaps and bounds better than he was 3 years ago in right field, he has really improved his defense in getting to baseballs. The arm is not great, and he caught that ball or stopped that ball, got his mitt on that ball when he was off balance, and I assumed the Dodgers were going to see that. If I could see it, I thought it was pretty obvious. I thought they were going to send the run around to score on that one. They decided, as you put it, rightfully so, they were a little conservative, a lot conservative on that play. And I thought you've been having trouble scoring in this series. You have an opportunity to score a run right there, mostly on Nick Castellanos, and they did not take advantage of that. And then the Phillies made him pay for it with Brandon Marsh's home run in the second inning. They all of a sudden go from a 1-0 lead to a 2-0 lead. So that was certainly, I think, a mistake, and I think you're right to call it out, of the Dodgers. As far as Ohtani goes, though, Pete, oh, my goodness gracious. I mean, there is no denying for me, no denying that. I know that a lot of times it comes to just players speak when they say, I don't care who it is. I'm just trying to throw strikes to get guys out. Bull. Okay. Shohei Ohtani is, and we've talked about it last night, is probably the most famous baseball star in the world right now. If he's up at the plate and you're Zach Wheeler in game 1, you're Matt Strahm in game 2, Matt Strahm to tonight's game, you're Aaron Nola in tonight's game as well. Oh, you know what's what. And one of the hardest pitches that Aaron Nola has thrown all year was to Shohei Ohtani when he was actually able to light him up with a fastball that went over 95 miles per hour. That is few and far between. You can't tell me that for Nola tonight, Strahm the last 2 nights, as well as for Zach Wheeler, the adrenaline wasn't pumping while facing Shohei Ohtani. And you can't tell me, especially it wasn't pumping when the crowd at CBP in South Philadelphia was going bananas for the last 3 nights. And I do give credit to the Dodgers. You face the Dodgers. You know you're facing one of the better teams, obviously, in baseball, certainly one of the better teams in the National League, and you know they're going to bring it. To answer that call and rise to the occasion, that's what winning teams do. Yeah, you're going to have your bumps in the road against the Braves, unfortunately, and the Phillies have had that. There are 2 series so far to this point against the Braves. But when push comes to shove, you face a team like the Dodgers or you face a team like the Brewers a month ago now, you want to be able to step up and rise to the occasion. I thought the Phillies did that very well in this series.
Yeah, without a doubt. Look, as we talked about yesterday, the baseball gods were once again eating cheesesteaks and drinking Yards beer down at Reading Square or whatever the hell it's called, Reading Terminal.
Reading Terminal. How dare you, sir?
I've been there. It was great. I loved it. It's fantastic. And I don't know about you, but I'm the what's the older one, Pat's or Geno's?
That's a great question. No self-respecting. No.
One where they yell at you, and if you don't get the order right, you're embarrassed and all.
They're not polite at either of them. That's very much a very similar vibe. What are you expecting? P's and Q's being minded at these establishments? Now, first off, let me just say this: no self-respecting Philadelphian goes to either of those 2 places sober and prior to 2 a.m. You know what I mean? You know, man, that's not like hey, I know what I'll do tonight for fun. Go to Patrick. No, look, melted. Never going to go down this road. Melted steak on a bun, melted cheese on a steak on a bun is delicious.
Yeah,
it's kind of hard to mess that up, but both establishments will get to you a little bit.
My one trip to Philly, I went to both in the same day, which I'm sure not a lot of people do, but I wanted to try them both. We went like about midday to the first one. I went to the airport, picked up some family members that were coming to town. We went to the second one. So I was like, yeah, that's not a good idea. But nonetheless, the baseball gods did that and then some today because everything, again, was going in favor of Philly. Just, squibbers, and the umpire was just all up their ass today. Like, oh, these balls are 6 inches outside the strike zone. That's a strike. That's a strike. That's a strike. Everything was a strike to this guy. He was non-discriminating about calling strikes that were not in the strike zone. So there's another guy that needs to go on the replace with a robot umpire list because that guy was terrible.
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. I love robo umps. I'm all for it. Brian O'Nora was behind the plate today.
Yeah, he was awful. 2 other things about this Phillies team that were very weird to me. Very bizarre. The pitching coach looks like he could still play. Like he's like 30. What is up with that guy? Like usually the pitching coach is smoking, walking out there with a beer in his back pocket, like 60 pounds overweight. How is this? Yeah. That guy's like, he's a former player from like a year ago. And then your catcher weighs about $140. Like, what's up with that guy? It's just so
Stubby. Garrett Stubbs. First off, Garrett Stubbs.
The framer.
Oh, he is magnificent when it comes to moving that mid around, certainly. And Brian O'Nora was buying what he was selling, no doubt. But Stubbs is, I don't even know. I want to say he was like maybe 5'10", 5'8". Like, he's not a big guy. But he walks out to Frank Sinatra, That's Life. And he said, you know what? I interviewed him a couple of years ago. He said, after the pandemic, we just got to deal with everything that's thrown our way. That's life, baby. And I said, you, my friend, I hope stick around here a long time. So, seems like that's where he's at. Yeah.
Hey, real quick, before we hit the break, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't Nick Castellanos kind of a pill? Like, he's kind of difficult, right?
He does not suffer fools. He's on another planet. He's the type of guy, and you've been in the business long enough where you know this. You'll make a statement to lead the subject into talking more about it. It's a better way of saying, and I hate when people do this, when you go to a coach or a player and you're like, talk a little bit about what happened in the second inning there. And it's like, what am I, bang cymbals for you next? So you'll say something like, in the second inning, it looked like there was a little bit of trouble there fielding that ball.
And he'll go, and
he'll go, is that a question? And it's like, geez, come on, man. Like, you know the deal. But Nick Castellanos is not what we consider in Philadelphia to be like a Philly type guy. But I do believe that he's genuine. But his version of being genuine doesn't mesh well with Philly. But as long as he hits 270 like he's been doing for the last month of the season, we're cool. We're cool, man. He also referred to Scooby-Doo as his favorite superhero. And I think he's the first person to ever do that in the history of humanity.
I can't remember where I was like, why does that name ring a bell? He rubbed me the wrong way a year or two ago. I think it was the All-Star game, maybe, where he was doing exactly what you just described to some reporter who was just trying to get an answer to a question. And he's just, I think it was a young female, he was roughing her up left, right, and center. I was like, really, dude? You just had a big moment on national TV, and this is the way you handle it? It was just like, all right.
That's him. I think to call him a pill is wildly accurate. He's very much a pill.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, the WNBA, and soon the Olympics, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all season long. And there's a marquee pitching matchup tonight in Baltimore. The Chicago Cubs pitch Shota Imanaga up against the Baltimore Orioles ace Corbin Burns. Because of this, FanDuel has the total runs over under set at 8.5. And the Orioles are favored to win the money line at -168. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partners of Major League Baseball.
Florida State and Clemson are joining the Big 12. Is that a true statement, a false statement, or why are we even making that statement?
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference.
We brought it up. Brett McMurphy said a couple months ago that there was an emergency scenario where Clemson and Florida State go to the Big 12. I laughed. Most people laughed. We kind of put it to the side. You looked at it from a journalistic standpoint, and now when we wake up today on July 12th, now the murmur is from Ross Dellinger, hey, there are third-party talks going on between those two schools and this conference. First and foremost, as plain as I can put it, what the hell is going on right now?
Well, first, thanks for having me on the show, Drake. It's always good to be here. At the end of the day, all we do on my show and my team, we just follow the breadcrumbs, right? And then we're a bunch of intelligent guys that track all the news and then try to put it into what for us is a historical context. We look back decades to see how things work out. And it was just, look, the Ross Dellinger thing yesterday was just confirmation of something that everybody had suspected for months and months and months. These third-party talks happened with the Pac-12 schools, and there certainly have been happening. Once Florida State declared they're out, unless somebody had written them a check for the SEC or the Big Ten, they had to be looking at other options just in case. Do they go independent? Do they do football only and leave basketball and everything in the ACC? Do they renegotiate their ACC deal? So for us, and me specifically, I'll speak for myself, 3 months ago it came out, a nightmare scenario may be they have to fall down, and what would be the Big 12 would be the last thing standing, right? But at the end of the day, Ross Dellinger comes out and says, well, now they're talking, but that doesn't mean they're going to the Big 12. These headlines are silly. At the end of the day, the Big 10 and the SEC are 1 and 2 in any order that you want to put them. I think most of their elites would like to go to the Big 10, but we're now hearing that maybe those relationships just haven't been built. Maybe they're not deep enough to go to the Big Ten. Then you have the trouble with the SEC. You have the old politics, the old politicking in the 20 and 30 years with Bobby Bowden. And maybe they're not so much liked in the SEC. And those doors are sort of shut. So now this is the question I put on Twitter today, late this afternoon, is, look, say the nightmare happens and FSU and Clemson are sitting there holding the bag, and the SEC and Big Ten, neither one send them an invite. They have to make a decision. They either go independent and wipe their hands of anything else. They fall back to the ACC, eat some humble pie, and maybe re-engage, knowing that in the future they could probably get out later. or the third option, which is the Big 12. And that's what Ross said. Basically, you have to find somewhere to go. And the Big 12 would give safety and security. It would give them a place that they could just hang out for a few years. And then once the next Big 12 media deal is negotiated, 2030, 2031, maybe even before that, once the Big 10 and the ACC want to grow more, then they can move on. And at that point, then the Big 12 has been a beneficiary of them being in the conference for a while. The entire conference is elevated with recruiting and all those other things that Matt Baker mentioned in his article yesterday, Tampa Bay Times. And now where we are today is I realize the frustration. I've seen a lot of the blowback, but I have friends that are FSU creators. I have friends that I've spent real time and energy working with them for those relationships. I care where they're going to end up. Right. I want them in the SEC if the Big Ten's not going to be there. I'm on record saying that. But if the SEC doesn't present an option for them, in my opinion, you have a choice. Go back to the ACC and have them chew you up, have the Wake Forest of the world make fun of you, or go to the Big 12 knowing that it's a parking lot.
Wow. Having this conversation, I almost get chills. How? Right. From a Big 12 standpoint, 4 years ago, conference is done. Yes. That's the headline. The Big 12's done. And today it's, look, now are you a life raft? Can you become a life raft for two of the biggest brands in the country that are being very well valued in expansion, right, but because of little, like these details that from the SEC and Big 10 could bar them from those two conferences. And of course, Brett Yormark is right there playing. He's got a hell of a poker face, by the way. The guy is he just went through media days. And now from John Kurtz, his original report with Ross Dellinger, the preliminary talks between the conference and those two, it's at least on the table. What does it say, Nathan, about the Big 12?
Well, you just said it right there. Brett Yormark is the evil genius behind the curtain. None of this is happening without Brett Yormark. And at the end of the day, the Big 12 is just putting themselves in a position to be successful. He's putting the conference in an area where if the schools want to step up and make really challenging, but maybe revolutionary choices like private equity to invest to help buy out schools from a conference they don't want to be in for a short-term gain. And then in that, there's some chart, some mechanism in the money that says over 5 or 6 years, most of that private equity gets paid back. And now all of a sudden you're not leveraged again because you were able to take advantage of Clemson and Florida State. And let's add Louisville. Let's add Miami. You bring those four schools. Those four schools by themselves, in my opinion, immediately the deal jumps to about $50 million. And then where do you go from there? You got the basketball credits and everything else. Now you're not so far behind the SEC.
The Tennessee Titans make a huge move, signing former All-Pro safety Jamal Adams.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast.
Let's talk about this signing because I can't say that I am a big fan of this move. Now, let me think about it in two different ways. The move itself, Jamal Adams, former All-Pro, 28 years old, on a 1-year, low-money contract, very little risk involved with that. So the move itself is fine with me. It's a fine move to make for the Tennessee Titans because of the low risk of the signing. But when we talk about Jamal Adams as a player, I can't say I'm a big fan of Jamal Adams as a player. And people talking about him as an All-Pro and he's 20, that's all great that he's 28 and he's a former All-Pro and in a vacuum. That would make you think, oh, that's a good move. But he has just not been a very good player the last few years. And even worse than that, he hasn't been on the field. That's the biggest issue, is the health here with Jamal Adams. So the move itself, 1-year deal, veteran player, they needed a safety. Okay, I get why they're doing it. I don't hate the move in a vacuum. But Jamal Adams as a player, I cannot say that I'm a big fan of. Now, Adams is 6'1", 213 pounds. Again, still only 28 years old. Guy out of LSU, was a top 10 draft pick. Phenomenal college player. He's played 7 seasons in the NFL, played 80 games in the NFL, 494 tackles. So basically 500 tackles, has had 4 interceptions, 7 forced fumbles, 36 pass breakups, 21 and a half sacks, 50 tackles for loss, has made 3 Pro Bowls, and has made 3 All-Pro teams, 1 first-team All-Pro, and then 2 second-team All-Pros. But that was a long time ago. He has not played, Jamal Adams has not played more than 12 games in a season since 2019. 2019 is when I started covering this team and doing the Locked On podcast for the Titans. So it has literally been 5 years since this guy played more than 12 games. And his last 3 seasons, he's only played 22 games, 12 games, 1 game in 2022, and only 9 games last year. So it's just a guy who does not play football games. And when you consider Amani Hooker has missed a lot of time recently, Elijah Molden has missed a lot of time recently, your top 3 safeties are all injury-prone guys. So that is, despite the production early in his career, it's tough. It's tough to look at Jamal Adams as the player that he is right now and get excited about the signing. That's just the reality. Again, it's a low-risk move. It's going to be a 1-year deal, very little money, low risk. I admit that. The move itself is not terrible. But Jamal Adams as a player, if we're being honest, is washed up. He's just completely washed up. And when you have fans of other teams saying, oh, the Titans are the retirement home, blah, blah, it's hard to push back against that with this move. All right, Jamal Adams is washed, and he's never on the field. And even if he's his best, even if he is healthy, this current version of Jamal Adams is not really a safety. He's a linebacker or even a defensive lineman. And I've been saying that all summer long, that I did not want Jamal Adams because he's not actually a safety. All right, we'll talk about his fit in the defense, but I don't think that he's a starter. I would play Elijah Molden over Jamal Adams at safety. So to me, this is a purely a depth signing, hoping that you strike lightning in a bottle, because, again, Jamal Adams, you look at where he's lined up. In his career, 2,800 snaps he's played in the box. In the box. He's not a safety, man. He's only played 1,000 snaps in the slot. He's only played 1,400 snaps at free safety, and most of that came in his first 3 years in the league a long time ago. So, to me, this is more of a linebacker. This is more of a dime package guy than it is an actual starting safety. Like, Jamal Adams does not check the box that all of us were hoping would get checked this summer. He is not a safety, okay? He cannot cover anybody. You want to look back. Since 2020, here are his coverage grades per Pro Football Focus. 52.5, 47.4. He had an 81 coverage grade on 8 snaps in 2022. He played 8 snaps in coverage. And then last year, he had a 50.7. The guy cannot cover a traffic cone, all right? Period. He can't. And you want to talk about him being a physical safety, he missed 25% of his tackles last year and gave up an 82% completion rate when he was targeted. This is not a good football player. He's just not a good football player. You know his name. You've heard of him. And that's why people think that he's good, because they've heard of him. And your casual football fan, if they've heard of the player, well, that's already exciting. But Jamal Adams is not a good football player anymore. He's simply not. Now, can he fit into this system? Yes, but I think his fit is going to be different than what a lot of people are acting like and what people are expecting him to do. Now, I will say this. There is a connection here that led to this signing, okay? This is my final piece of information on what you need to know about Jamal Adams as a player. He played with Denard Wilson for the New York Jets from 2017 to 2020. Did have his best years under Denard Wilson with the Jets. That's real, okay? He also, his father played with Ran Carthon's father. So there's a connection there too. Also worth noting that Ran Carthon's agent as a player is the same agent that reps Jamal Adams now. So there are a ton of connections all over the board, and that's why this happened. But look, guys, I'm just going to be point blank honest. I don't like Jamal Adams as a player. The move is low risk, sure. The move itself is fine. But him as a player, again, never healthy, misses a ton of games. When he is healthy, he's not good. So you may recognize Jamal Adams' name, but that does not mean that he's the player that he once was. So in a vacuum, the move is fine. The Titans needed safety depth. It's low risk, but Jamal Adams isn't a starting safety in the NFL, and he's not even better than Elijah Molden.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on your tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even up to an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And with the Game Time guarantee, it means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app today, and new users can get $20 off of their first purchase with promo code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Buyers and sellers, what they could be selling, what teams are wanting to buy at the trade deadline.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast.
Let's go through the standings real quick. This is going to help us determine who are sellers and who are buyers as we get close to the trade deadline. And we look at the AL East. The Baltimore Orioles are on top by 2 games over the Yankees, and the Orioles are obvious buyers. I think they're one of the World Series favorites. I think if you look on FanDuel, they actually have the 5th best odds, but I think they probably have the best odds of anybody coming out of the American League this year. Their real big need is bullpen. So they really shouldn't be taking away. And obviously every contender is looking for bullpen arms, but not necessarily the Braves, something the Braves have to have. So I don't think they'll really be competing with the Orioles at the trade deadline. You look at the Yankees, who again are just 2 games back of the Orioles. They are obvious buyers. They honestly need a lot. You look at that lineup, and outside of Judge and Soto, there's really not a lot there to get too impressed by. So in the rotation, got off to a great start, but Luis Hill has struggled here lately. Stroman, Rodon kind of up and down. Garrett Cole's making his way back. They could use a starter. They could probably use some help in the bullpen, and they could use a bat as well. So I think the Yankees are going to be looking for a little bit of everything. Now, again, they're still really good, a plus 100 run differential. They're in fine spot to make the postseason. But again, just looking at the roster and looking at some of the stats from their players, it feels like they need a good bit. In the AL Central, the Cleveland Guardians are up 5 games on the Minnesota Twins, and the Guardians' main need is going to be starting pitching. So again, something the Braves don't really have to have, and I don't think is a priority for them at the deadline, so they shouldn't be competing with the Guardians. You look at the Mariners in the AL West, they're up 2 games on the Astros. The Astros have really gotten it going now. The need for the Mariners is offense. So this is a team that could be competing with the Braves. They need third base and outfield, so they just really need some help offensively. The Phillies, they are up, obviously, a big lead in the NL East. They're up 8.5 games on the Braves. They're going to be buyers. They could use maybe an outfield bat, so Braves could be competing with the Phillies for one of the top outfield bats. I know Luis Roberts, a name that's been kind of mentioned along with the Phillies. The Braves, they need 2 bats, in my opinion. One to be a regular outfielder, everyday outfielder, and another one for the bench, preferably if your starter, your everyday starter is not a left-handed batter, then getting a left-handed bat for the bench, or vice versa. If you get a guy that's a left-handed starter getting a right-handed bench bat, I think they need 2 bats. I don't think they obviously would love to get some bullpen help as well if you could, but it's not a necessity. and same for starting pitching. I think their primary focus has to be on getting at least 2 bats. For the Brewers, who are up 5.5 games in the NL Central, they are looking for starting pitching. They just made a move not too long ago for Aaron Savali, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking to upgrade their starting pitching staff again before the trade deadline. The Dodgers are up 7.5 games on the Padres in the NL West, despite being 4-6 in their last 10 games, losing 3 in a row. But Padres are also 4-6 in their last 10, and they've lost 4 in a row with just a plus 16 run differential. Dodgers need starting pitching, though they could be getting some help with that. I believe Dustin May is still on track to come back in the second half, as well as Clayton Kershaw. So they could be getting some help there, but they're likely going to be looking for starting pitching at the deadline, maybe some bullpen help as well. As for the Padres, they need pitching. So they're another team that's going to be looking for pitching. So the Braves' primary teams that they'll be battling with for outfield bats, I think, are going to be the Mariners and the Phillies. And maybe the Yankees are teams they're going to be competing with, teams that are obvious buyers. Now, teams that are obvious sellers and what I think they could be selling at the deadline, I think the Blue Jays are an obvious seller. You know, it's a tough division that they're in. Kevin Kiermaier doesn't really do much for me with the Braves. Justin Turner, Trevor Richards, Yimi Garcia, Yusei Kikuchi, maybe Vlad Jr., maybe Bo Bichette, maybe George Springer. Those could be some big names that are potentially moved. I don't know if they're, great fits. I know everybody talks about Bo Bichette for the Braves, but not great defensively, having a poor offensive year, and you're probably still going to have to pay a premium to get him. George Springer is an interesting one, veteran outfielder. If he can stay healthy, might make some sense for the Atlanta Braves. They might trade Chris Bassett. Again, not really something that the Braves need, but I'm just mentioning all the players that I think these teams could be trading. For the Tigers, another obvious seller, although I hate it. They were kind of my sneaky, trendy pick this year, but the AL Central has turned out to be much better than I thought it would be. So maybe the Tigers are still another year away. Mark Canha is a name we've talked about. I think could be a solid option for the Braves in the outfield. Kenta Maeda, Jack Flaherty, Andrew Chafin, and Shelby Miller in the bullpen could be some names that get moved at the deadline. The White Sox are obvious sellers. Eric Fetty is an interesting name. Michael Kopech for the bullpen. Paul DeJong, a name that's, I think, a lot mentioned with the Braves, but I've talked about him on here before. I just don't see him as a real upgrade. I think it's more of a lateral move between him and Arcia. And Tommy Pham, I know, is somebody a lot of people have mentioned for the Braves. I know there could potentially be some character issues there for maybe why the Braves wouldn't move him. Andrew Vaughn could be another White Sox on the move. Maybe Garrett Crochet and Luis Robert. There's been a lot of talk around Luis Robert potentially getting traded. I think they would be idiots to trade Garrett Crochet unless you just get a ransom for him. Maybe you feel like his stock's never going to be higher. Maybe you feel like he's not going to be part of your turnaround. But, for these teams who are bad now, one, you got to give your fans something to get excited about. And when you got these young players who are locked up for a long time through arbitration, I mean, you got to build around somebody. And I feel like Garrett Crochet is that guy that they could potentially build around. The Angels are another obvious seller. Tyler Anderson could be a solid rotation arm for somebody. Brandon Drury, if he's healthy right now, I'm not sure. Carlos Estevez out of the bullpen. Matt Moore, another solid bullpen arm that could be available. Luis Rengifo, a guy we've talked about for the Braves, I think could make sense, but I believe he is also injured right now, but a guy that can play all over and does a little bit of everything for you. Griffin Canning, another pitcher. Taylor Ward, somebody we just talked about the other day on Tuesday's podcast that I think would be a solid fit for the Braves. Kevin Pillar, obviously, we know how great he was with the Braves last year, hitting against left-handed pitching. So Angels got some interesting players that I think could be really good fits for the Braves. The A's, obvious sellers. Paul Blackburn, Miguel Andujar. I've seen him mentioned as a possibility for the Braves in the outfield. Maybe Brent Rooker and Mason Miller. Although, again, similar to what I just said with the White Sox, you got some good young players. You're not paying them a lot of money. Why would you not build around these guys if you're actually trying to win, which is a huge question mark for the A's. I don't know if they're trying to win or not. But, again, I would not move Mason Miller unless I'm getting a ransom For the Nationals, who I do think are obvious sellers now, I know they were in the wild card picture there for a minute playing some good baseball, but I think they do have to be obvious sellers. Patrick Corbin on the final year of his deal, maybe he gets moved if somebody's just looking for a guy to eat innings. Trevor Williams, Kyle Finnegan, Hunter Harvey could be some solid bullpen arms that are moved. Lane Thomas and Jesse Winker, both of them I think are great fits for what the Braves need. I believe Lane Thomas has 2 more years of control after this one, so he might cost you a little bit too much. Winker's a guy I've been talking about a lot over the last several weeks that I think fills a lot of needs for the Braves. For the Marlins, who are obvious sellers, Josh Bell, Tanner Scott, maybe Jazz, but I think it would take a lot to get him, and I'm just not that high on Jazz. Maybe AJ Puck, another solid arm for the bullpen, so the Marlins might have a little bit to trade. The Rockies, who, again, another obvious seller here. Herman Marquez could be a sneaky pick. He makes $10 million in 2025, not a lot. He hit 99 in his last rehab outing. I've always thought if you get him out of Coors Field that he could be a really solid pitcher. Would probably more of a 2025 move. I wouldn't get him hoping to get much this year, but it feels like a move that Alex Anthopoulos might make just because it's kind of under the radar. I don't think you'd have to give up much. And, if you get something out of him this year, great, but it also sets you up for another arm for next year. So that's kind of my sneaky pick. I don't necessarily think it's going to happen because I think there's more pressing needs for the Braves, but keep an eye on Herman Marquez and see if he gets moved from the Rockies as he's working his way back right now. Charlie Blackmon, he has 5'10" rights, so he would have to approve any trade. I've talked about him. I think there is a small fit there with the Braves and Charlie Blackmon. Cal Quantrill, Austin Gomber, and Elias Diaz, a catcher. Could be some other names that get moved at the deadline from those teams. So those are my obvious sellers and some of the players I think they'll be selling. So that kind of gives you a pool.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, the WNBA, and soon the Olympics, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all season long. And there's a marquee pitching matchup tonight in Baltimore. The Chicago Cubs pitch Shota Imanaga up against the Baltimore Orioles ace Corbin Burns. Because of this, FanDuel has the total runs over under set at 8.5. And the Orioles are favored to win the money line at -168. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partners of Major League Baseball.
The big summer league now in Vegas is coming up. What do you need to know? What do you need to watch? Let's do big picture here, James. What are you looking forward to the most in Summer League? What are you looking for? What do you want to see? Talk to me about what you're expecting and looking for and excited about in Summer League.
I'm looking for guys to obviously play well. I know in the grand scheme of things, Summer League doesn't matter, but I do think it does matter in a sense that you want to get off on the right foot. You want to get used to the speed of the game, the pace of the game, the physicality of the game. And like for me, the guys that I like, I want to continue to see things that I do like about them. You can have a bad summer league and end up being a superstar. You can have a great summer league and end up being still playing summer league, like some guys that are still playing. So it's not the end all be all, but I still feel like it's an important for the players to like get a good look, a good feel for what's going to work for you, what does work for you, and what do you continue to need to work on. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's really fun. This is the best summer league. Like California Classic is fun. So is the Salt Lake Summer League to get a little taste, like no downplaying them. But the Vegas one is all 30 teams. Everybody's there. Everybody in the league is there. Like all the GMs, some of the owners, a lot of the players come out, especially the first weekend. I'm sure a lot of people even listening to this are going out to Vegas. It's really fun. If you've never done it, highly recommend it. let's talk about some of the big games. We're going to mostly cover Friday. And before we do, I do want to correct myself. On yesterday's episode, I said the first time the Hawks play is Sunday, and I was baffled why they would play against the Spurs. That is not the case. They get the primetime game against the Wizards. I think we should start with that because it's the biggest one, and then we'll go in chronological order. What beyond Sarr versus Ricochet? First of all, I'm a little disappointed we didn't get Hawks Bulls. It would have been a fun way just to carry on with that weird rivalry. But you know, we'll have to. That's the NBA tabling it and making you more excited, I guess, for that. They're not going to put that on TNT, but they're going to maybe put it on NBA TV at some point in their first matchup, make it a little bit exciting. So Hawks Wizards play against each other. Some names on this roster that I think stand out. Let's start with some of the NBA guys. Kobe Buffkin, the Hawks first round pick last year. Mo Gay, second round pick last year. Ricochet, Keaton Wallace, who's Cason Wallace's brother.
Shout out to Keaton Wallace, man. I've known Keaton since he was a little jit, so.
Yeah, it's crazy. I remember him at UTSA very vividly. I loved his game as a 3-and-D guy. Nikola Duricic is going to be out there. That's their second round pick this year. And then the Wizards have, I think they have the best roster on the entire summer league. They have Patrick Baldwin Jr., Jared Butler, John Butler, Bub Carrington. I mean, even Jules Bernard, he played in the NBA. Justin Champagnie, Johnny Davis, Keyshawn George, Marquise Noel, Eugene Omarui also played in the NBA. Alex Sarr, Tristan Vukcevic, who came over at the end of the year. That is a stacked team. What are you looking for? Like, let's just talk, I guess, Ricochet, Sarr. Like, it's the big thing. What are you looking for the most from both of those guys?
I expect I'm going to do something different. I'm going to go what I expect instead of what I'm looking for. I expect for you to see what you always see with Ricochet and what you always see from Sarr, whether good or bad. I don't think that these two guys are going to stand out in a summer league setting just because of where they are in their development. So, like, I expect Ricochet to make threes. I expect him to be big. But if he comes out there and he's trying to, like, be a pick-and-roll initiator, I don't expect to see from him. But at the same time, whether you agree with it, I agree with it, the world agrees with it, he was the number one pick, and there are going to be eyes on him as the number one pick. So I think he should get off to a good start. As far as Sarr goes, I think, he's very raw offensively. And, he's somebody that I don't expect to make like an immediate impact just because like he isn't great at one particular thing right now on offense. But he has some guys to help him out. Bub Carrington, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. All right. And then you mentioned like he's like a draft Twitter favorite, but Jared Butler can play. So like he's got guys to help him out. But at the same time, I mean, are they going to play him at the 4? Are they going to play him at the 5? I don't know. So like my expectations for him just don't stink it up, I guess you could say, for those two really.
No, that's funny. I think I agree, though. I mean, don't expect Ricochet to be this play initiator, and don't expect Sarr to be an ISO big much. You might see a few times from each of them they get isolation chances, but at the end of the day, I mean, their guards are also like guards have the ball in their hands the most of any one player or one position. I mean, guards have the ball far and away. They have the biggest usage, and because of that, guys like I put in the name right, Marquise Noel.
Yes.
He's probably going to get a lot of shots up. And because of that, Sarr's usage is going to dip. They also have Tristan Vukcevic, who I think the Wizards really like as a stretch big. He's going to get touches. So it is going to be interesting. I don't think you can't stop people from overreacting. I think people will no matter what. But with Sarr, I'm just more interested to see how they use him. Is he going to be the stretch big that attacks closeouts, or are they going to keep him in the paint first and make him, be a popper? And from like a free throw line pick and roll or something. Like, how do they use him in that way? That's what I think I'm most excited about with those two.
Yeah, I agree. I would only be concerned if like Ricochet went out there and it wouldn't be concerned, but if he went out there and shot the ball poorly and like his flaws just really looked bad, and part of your flaws looking bad is you trying to get out of your comfort zone. So if he's going out there trying to be a pick and roll initiator and he can't go by anybody, and then I'm like, okay, maybe he doesn't know who he is, or maybe he's trying to play up to his draft. Whatever, where he was drafted, whether instead of playing up to like his skill set. But like, I mean, those two are number 1 and number 2, but I don't have like big expectations for them in summer league.
Yeah. What about some of the other guys on those rosters? Like, let's just talk about the recent draft picks, right? I think Kobe Buffkin's the best player in this game for right away. In terms of just like, I expect him to have a monster summer league before he withdraws. I don't think he'll play the whole summer league. I just have been a massive fan of Kobe Buffkin. He's still 20 years old, and he was a sophomore in college, and this is his second year in the league. Like, that's pretty nuts. I'm also really interested to see what Nikola Dursic does. He's a guy who they took in the second round. And then also one more, this will be a complimentary piece. Like, I think you're going to have one of these two on the floor at all times, Reese Shea and Miles Norris. I know your brother really liked Miles Norris as a 6'9" shooter. I'm interested to see if he gets any looks and, how well he plays.
See, yeah, and another thing, like, okay, you mentioned Jurisic. I expect him to go out there and hoop and look really good. And then if Reese Shea doesn't play well, they're like, oh, man, our second round pick was better than the first round pick. People are going to say these things, whether they're true or not or whatever. So it's like summer league, you have to go out there and you have to know how to hoop versus playing basketball. Playing basketball is playing the right way. Reese Shea is probably better suited to play next to Trae Young than he is a summer league point guard. And that's just the nature of how his game is. But yeah, like, I know Kobe Buffkin is young still, but like I personally want to see my second year guys look like they're way too good for the setting. So even the last one we just had in Salt Lake, like Keontae was too good. Keontae had a terrible first game and he had 30, and it's because they couldn't keep him off the foul line. He set the second game, and then the third game he was like, okay, I can get mine. I shot terribly, and then he looked like a much better player that his second game, which was their third game. So it's like, no, Kobe Buffkin didn't have the opportunities that Keontae had, but I still expect him to look better than the rookies in this situation because he does have a year of NBA experience under his belt. And that goes for all of these guys who we're going to mention, whether it be guys for the Magic, whoever. So that's just my opinion on like second year guys.
Yeah, I agree. You want to see them be the best player in the game almost every single time, or one of the best, because if there's multiple second year players, you can't.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on your tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even up to an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And with the Game Time guarantee, it means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app today, and new users can get $20 off of their first purchase with promo code LOCKED ON. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Behind the scenes of the New York Giants Hard Knock series.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast.
I am so excited to have these two guests with me. They are Paul Camaretta and Emily Cameron. They are the showrunners of HBO's Hard Knock series, New York, an off season with the New York Giants. So they're here to maybe give us a little insight behind the scenes, how this great program, which so far as of this recording has aired 2 episodes, has come together, their roles in it, and any other little secrets they might want to dish. So Paul, Emily, thank you so much for joining me on today's program.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Patricia. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. All right, let's jump right in because I know there's a ton of questions here. And I've got to start off with, this is a very, very large project. Even though it's only 5 episodes and each episode gets scaled down to about, 35 to 40 minutes. It sounds like it was a very large project. Can you just kind of take us through the setup in arranging the logistics and kind of organizing this? Because this isn't like a scripted program where, okay, you have a script and this is what you got to do here and this is what you got to do there.
So I think the thing that we had to our advantage, and anyone who's worked with football people who are as well oiled as what the Giants are knows that their schedule is really or their lives are really schedule driven. And to give you what I call sort of the headline of that, it's what Bill Parcells used to talk about: Sunday at 1. The games are going to happen Sunday at 1, no matter what we do. We got to back everything that we do into that deadline. And so extrapolate that throughout the year. They have deadlines throughout the year. And for the personnel people, what that means is almost deadlines that never end. They have deadlines throughout the fall where they're scouting college players, obviously other players across the league that are the pro personnel. But when the season ends, they have a whole series of deadlines that build out from whenever their season ends, whether it's the morning after week 18 or the morning after the Super Bowl. Football teams are already right back at work, working towards the college all-star games, working towards the combine, working towards ultimately the draft. And then again, it starts over when they get to August. So what we do as storytellers is try and find those tentpole events, try to find all those deadlines, try and find all those boundaries, try and find all the sort of skeleton of their season, their off season in this case, because that really becomes the skeleton of our story. We're following the path of their work through the season and how they're solving problems and unraveling puzzles and gathering information and implementing it from when the regular season ends through the draft. So we sort of do a first kind of recon of like, what does this world look like? Where are they going? When are they doing this? What's important to them? We really just started asking them a lot of questions. Over the years, we gain institutional knowledge of how football teams work, but there's 32 of them. They all do things a little bit differently. And they all have different things they prioritize or how they allocate staff here and there. So it's really important for us as storytellers to sort of figure out what their world looks like and then figure out the best way that we think we need the tools we need and the people we need to capture that story and then bring it to viewers in a way that makes sense and ultimately obviously is entertaining and insightful.
Yeah, and kind of to piggyback off what Paul said too, like this started like back in February for us too. And it's a part of the we've covered off season before through players' eyes, but never really through the front office eyes like we have this time around. So there was a lot we didn't really have a ton of knowledge on. So as Paul said, like we had to kind of ask the Giants, like kind of what's your schedule and how do things work and are these tent poles the right tent poles to kind of base things off of? But that was the exciting part about kind of doing this show is it's the first time we've really been this in depth with this part of the front office and this part of the calendar.
Now, what I found interesting is the Giants historically have been camera shy, if you will, when it comes to Hard Knocks. And I know this is their 100th anniversary. They kind of want to, get the word out about, the history of the franchise. But really, this show focuses on the present more so than the history and stuff like that. In setting up these meetings with the Giants, did you find anything, any, like, I don't know if reluctance is the right word, but was there any hesitation or can you share how those conversations kind of went to make sure that, hey, we're here to tell your story and keep with the spirit of the 100th anniversary of the franchise?
Yeah, I think exactly kind of like you said, that it being the 100th season of the Giants is a special part for them, but also is kind of a cool part for us to tell this is the building of the 100th version of the New York Giants, which was awesome. So I think a lot of those conversations were definitely just about how important the 100th season is, but I think it was also about wanting to kind of do something big that drew a lot of fans and do something for the first time was kind of another cool part. I mean, historically, the Giants have been at the forefront of the first of a lot of things. So I think this was a cool combination of celebrating the fact that they've been, a groundbreaking franchise for out there 100 years. And this was a chance to kind of be groundbreaking in the present as they embark on their 100th season.
In terms of some of the logistics, one thing that kind of popped into my mind when I was watching this last episode 2, obviously we all wanted to see the Saquon Barkley, Joe Shane phone conversation. And I'm just wondering if you guys can share a little bit regarding those third party conversations, because obviously, you've got your cameras in there, you're shooting all the stuff, but now when you've got a third party, the Saquon Barkley, his agent, stuff like that, how did those logistics work out? Did you have to get their permission to use that footage or was it understood that was going to happen?
So I think whenever NFL Films is doing whatever we do for whatever project, wherever we are, we're always telling great football stories and doing it kind of in the spirit of celebrating the entire game and all the people involved. So it's So I would use the analogy of when we capture a player at a game or a coach, and there's other people that, whether it's just an image of them crossing paths or sound of them, it's sort of that same situation where the Giants in the sort of the conduct of their work this spring, we're going to interact with people both within the building, outside the building. And so we are going to always capture those things in good faith and then use them with the best discretion to make sure that the best story is told, and that and then everyone's comfortable with it from the top all the way down. So I think it's kind of built into our DNA, and that trust is something that, again, obviously the Giants open their doors to us, but it's something that we hold very sacred with all the clubs, with all the work that we do in sort of expressing our gratitude for their giving us the ability to tell their stories, and how we protect that trust, and how we just handle it all the right way.
You look at this type of program, and again, I don't want to call it reality TV, but it is kind of reality TV because you don't have a script. That being said, I would assume you kind of, in your early meetings with the team officials, say, okay, this is kind of the direction we want to go in. But then again, something pops up that I'm sure takes you in another direction. Did you find that you had a lot of, twists and turns as this program was unfolding?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I feel like, to your point, yeah, we made a plan based on the tentpole events and working with the Giants for their schedule. But then, going through kind of the footage you captured too, there's a ton of things that kind of pop up that you're like, wow, this is really interesting. I didn't even know that this went on. I feel like, especially in something that we've kind of never really covered before too. So that was actually, I think, the biggest kind of like lift of the job and biggest thing to figure out for this show was like just seeing kind of all the stuff, and then at films kind of deciding like, oh wow, like this is something we didn't even think of that would be interesting, that is just captivating. Like in episode 1, I feel like the Shane Bowen kind of going through and briefing the staff on his defense, had no idea that was even a thing. We were just kind of like, our cameras were up, and when we watched it, we were like, wow, I've never seen this before. So I think that was kind of the exciting part as we got rolling on this. Cause I think, candidly, there was like a little bit of like, this is going to be a lot of meetings. Like, is this going to be, it's not the players like kind of practicing, like there's not really a ton of action. Like, are we going to have enough juice? And once we saw kind of stuff like that, we were like, this is fascinating and stuff we've never seen. So I think that like we definitely had great plans in place, but I think the majority of what you see in the show is a lot of what popped up. And I think something that even kind of surprised me for sure was just how, like, we knew they were going to have draft prep, didn't know how much they actually had and what those conversations entailed. Like, knew they were going to have, look at free agents, but didn't realize how kind of in depth they go, even back as far as February. So I would say that definitely happened, throughout the entire series, and you've kind of seen it already in episodes 1 and 2, and you'll continue to do so.